Herzliya Conference 2012. Herzliya Conference 2012. Special interviews, highlights, and live broadcasts on IDC Radio.
Welcome to the IDC Radio at 106.2 FM or online at 1062fm.co.il. My name is Anouk Lori and producing this segment is Irit Livne. Here with me is Dr. Marta Lucia Ramirez, former Defense Minister of Colombia, former Foreign Trade Minister, former Senator, former presidential candidate in the last presidential race. Marta Lucia, welcome to the 11th Annual Herzliya Conference. Your talk at the conference tomorrow is about women in national security. I was particularly interested in your insights this year because of the unique position you held in Colombia. As the only female Minister of Defense in 2002 and in 2003, where under President Alvaro Uribe, you were able to implement changes that led to a significant decrease in violence in Colombia. Many paramilitary groups were demobilized, and the guerrillas lost control of much of the territory they once dominated. The homicide rate also almost halved between 2002 and 2006. However, I must remind our listeners that Colombia still remains the world's largest producer of cocaine. So let's be optimistic, but not too much. Marta, do you think that more women should hold key defense and security positions? And if more women were in charge, would there be less conflict in the world? Many women think so, me included. What do you think about women in defense positions?
First of all, Anouk, thank you for inviting me. I'm so happy to be here in Israel. I'm so happy to participate in this 12th conference, Herzliya Conference. I know how important it is and how important it's to share our experiences, not only about economy, but also about the conflict resolution. As you said, it's a challenging position to be a defense minister. And in my case, I believe that I'm not only the only one woman who has been a defense minister in Colombia, but also the only woman who has been a defense minister in a conflict, during a conflict in a country. And it was, of course, the most important experience in my career. And it was also something very positive because President Uribe, his leadership, and also the cooperation from the international community, from some specific countries like the United States, some of the European countries, Israel, of course, it was a very important cooperation in order to fight against guerrilla, against paramilitary, against narco-traffickers, because this is something very difficult. When narco-traffic is involved in a conflict, when narco-traffic is involved in the war, it's too difficult to achieve peace. So that's why we were very focused in this fight against the illegal groups, but also very focused in provide protection to all the Colombian citizens. And this is something that women, we know how to do it. Women are, because of gender, of course, we are very familiar about to protect family, to protect citizens, to protect all over around us. And it was something that we implement in the security policy, how the military forces and how the police become better protecting the Colombian citizens.
So you're saying that as a woman, with this instinct that you have of protection, or it might be called the motherly instinct, you think that helped you towards your goal of protecting your citizens?
I believe that yes, because we developed a strategic plan for 10 years in order to reduce homicides, to reduce kidnapping, in order to reduce terrorist attacks. And we were very focused in how the military and the police could be successful in these goals, trying to protect better the citizens. For example, for many years, the military and the police they were taking control of their own bases instead of being on the streets protecting the citizens. So that's why it was very easy for the guerrilla to kidnap many people in the Colombian roads, in the Colombian rural areas. But when we put the military and when we put the police taking control of the roads, the kidnap were reduced very rapid. Let me tell you some numbers. In Colombia, in year 2002, we used to have 3,200 kidnapped every year. That's a lot. Last year, Colombia has 140 kidnapped. This is, of course, a lot, but comparing 140 with 3,200 10 years ago, you can see how this attitude towards the protection of citizens has changed dramatically in our country.
Israel's security policy is determined mostly by men. There has never been a female defense minister in Israel or a female chief of staff for that matter. Do you think that appointing women to these positions could be helpful in Israel? And what added value do you think that a woman could bring to that position?
Of course, I cannot say Israelis, what do you have to do? But of course, I believe that a woman in security, women as a defense minister, we know that we have changed dramatically in our countries. This is the Colombian experience. In my case, I was very clear that the goal to bring peace to our country, it was a goal that we have to share. The civilian and, of course, the military. The civilian must be a defense minister as a civilian who give the civilian control to the military, but also to bring the civilian support to the military. And that's why I'm talking about this balance, because we need the military, and also the military need the civilian in order to have a legitimacy, in order to have the population support. So as a defense minister, I was clear and I was convinced that if we want to achieve the peace of Colombia, the security for Colombians, the strength of our democracy, we need to work in a collaborative attitude, and we need to introduce some reforms within the military. Of course, it was not easy. I introduced some deep reforms in different fields. For example, in the budget, in the control of the military expenditures. And it was difficult because they used to manage this as a security issue. But I was looking not only for security, but also for efficiency, for transparency, for legitimacy. And that's why I said we need to show the country, we need to show the Colombians how efficient and how transparent we are in the use of this budget for the military. And it was difficult, as I mentioned, but at the end of the day, I was success in that goal.
How were you perceived by the military men in your country when you tried to tell them how to run their so-called business?
When you speak about the military men, there is a unfair generalization, because of course militaries are very close. They have this solidarity between them, but of course there are some with a more modern thinking, with a more modern attitude sometimes. So that's why in this military expenditure and all, sometimes some of the military decisions, there were some very in favor of all the changes. There were some others that were against, of course. And as you know, in the military, there is this line of command, this respect for the hierarchy. So sometimes those who were in favor, they were in the second or third level, so they were silent, or they were very shy about supporting these measures. But what is important is that you are clear enough about the goals that you have, about the necessity to work together and to share responsibilities, and about the responsibility to change your country, to provide peace, not only for the present, but also for the long term of your country and for the future generations. If you do this without ego, if you do this with a historic responsibility, you are ready to negotiate with them, and you are ready to do those changes, and at the end of the day, you could be successful. This ego sometimes is a devil that affects the relations within governments, within cabinets, within these civilian and military relations, and this is bad for the country.
What do you think of Israel's unique position of drafting its women into the military?
I believe that Israel has achieved something that I really admire. First of all, every woman and man goes to the military service. This is something which is so important because it shows the civilian population that the responsibility with the future is not only from the militaries, it's also from the civilian population. Everybody who has children in the military, they are interested, they are committed, they are supportive of the military. And you really need that in a society in order to be success against illegal activities, against terrorism, against the enemies of your country and your democracy. In Israel, I like very much that I met so many women as officials in the military, in the army. We had a bilateral cooperation between Colombia and Israel, as I mentioned. And when I was a Minister of Defense, in that moment, it was not easy for a woman to become an official. They have to stop when they were in this in the lieutenant level. They have to leave the army. Right now, it is changing. Right now, because the President Uribe and myself, we introduce some criteria about how women could change in a positive way, not only the military for the operations, sometimes intelligence, for example, but also how women can improve the organization in the military forces, logistics in the military forces. So we have right now women who are in this career, women who are in the line of command, and I hope that we are going to have women as generals. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be alive to see them maybe in 30 years or something like this, but I know that we are going to have some in Colombia. Let me tell you something. In Colombia, the military and the police both depend of the Minister of Defense. Mm-hmm. So in the police, it was the same. There were no women in the very high levels of the official side of the police. Because of these reforms that myself and President Uribe that we introduced, right now we have in Colombia 2 women as the generals in the police, in the Colombian police. So I really believe that women involved in the security issues and in the peace are necessary because our societies deserve and need this women vision about the family, about the country, about the children, and about the future.
You mentioned you admire Israeli women going to the military, but unfortunately, even in Israel, even within the military, there are very few women who can actually go and fight in combat units. I think that's still one prejudice, even within the military, to think that women should be in positions of bureaucracy, but not go out and fight for the country because of this idea that a woman might be too weak in a situation of war or conflict. What's your opinion on that?
I believe that women are capable to be trained. And to be trained, it means that are capable to go to combat operations. Of course, it depends, because if we can train women as commandos, I'm sure that they can do it. I know that in Colombia we have women in the guerrilla, and let me tell you something. The most brave women who were in the inner circle of the very high level combatants, in the very high level guerrilla commanders, they were women in the inner circle. So they were protecting them and they were fighting with them. So, of course, women are capable to be in the very high levels in the military institutions. Depending on the training, they will be ready to go to the field and to combat. I'm sure of that. And, of course, in the Air Force, because today it's so important to have this strength in the military, all the Air Force. In Colombia, we have women who are in the war airplanes, and they are doing very well.
We've been talking primarily about your position as defense minister, but in the past several years, you've also been involved in civil projects, primarily aimed at fighting corruption in your country. Israel also suffers, unfortunately, from many political corruption scandals. And recently, Israel fell to the 36th place in 2011's Corruption Perceptions Index, which is its lowest ranking ever. What have you found effective in the battle against corruption in Colombia?
Let me tell you that, unfortunately, corruption is one of the most important problems right now in Colombia. And corruption means that not only the politicians, but different levels in the society has been infiltrated by corruption. In our country, we have a big problem, which is narcotraffic. Narcotraffic, as you said at the beginning of this interview, Colombia used to be the most important producer of cocaine in all over the world. Now, I'm not sure if we are in the first or the second place, because as you know, Afghanistan has a lot of narcotics also, cocaine and opium, whatever. But which is very sad, it's that we have right now in Latin America so many countries involved in narcotics. Mexico, as you know, they are suffering a lot because of narcotraffic. In Peru, Bolivia, Ecuador, some of them are not only producers, but they are these countries where drugs dealers are using to traffic from some of these countries to others in the hemisphere, and of course Venezuela. So that's why it's important to be clear that narcotraffic, it's a big threat for institutions, it's a big threat for societies, and it's a big threat for the health of our children.
So what's your strongest tool against corruption? Because in Israel, it's not primarily about narco-traffic, but corruption is corruption, and to battle it...
Yeah, so I was mentioning corruption because it makes a difference with Israel. As you said, here you have problems with politicians, but politics are also related with the civilian. So when you have, for example, the expenditure, you have somebody in the civilian side who is offering money, who is offering gifts, who is offering trouble or bribes to people who are taking decisions. So what you need is to provide transparency. Transparency in all the decisions that you take as a public servant. Transparency in all the budget and how do you use the budget, because it reduces the room for corruption. And of course you need an attitude in the society. A society against corruption is going to be a better society for the future. So I'm sure that if you put the control not only in the political side but also in the civil population, in the in private enterprises, in companies, if you have strong laws against bribes that you offer to public servants, I believe that you can have a better future in that. As I said, unfortunately, Colombia is suffering a lot about corruption. So that's why we cannot say we solved the problem, but we are in the process to solve through transparency.
On a different issue, South America as a whole has generally been a very staunch supporter of the Palestinian cause, and often very critical of Israel. Do you think that Colombia, which, like Israel, has a history of security threats, might have a different view of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict?
Let me tell you something. It's true that some of the Latin American countries are very in favor of the Palestinian cause. In last year, when this resolution in the United Nations, some of the Latin American countries support the Palestinian proposal, not Colombia. Colombia never support the resolution, but of course Colombia wants to help to achieve peace in Israel and of course with the Palestinians. So it's important to understand that we in Colombia, because we have suffered a lot because of terrorism, we are very familiar with all this suffer that creates in Israel to have terrorists from Palestine, from different places, fighting or attacking sometimes your civilian population. We have this cooperation, bilateral cooperation, and we believe that it's also necessary to have the international community very committed fighting against terrorism and against terrorists. It's so sad that we have so many resolutions in the Security Council that are not very effective. For example, in year 2000, it was a very important resolution against those countries that provide support and that provide share for terrorists. But nothing happens, and Colombia has suffered a lot because of that. For example, for many years we were very concerned about the guerrilla coming back and forth in the Colombian and Venezuelan border. And we were asking for intervention of United Nations through resolutions or whatever, and it was not enough. So we need to develop this understanding from the international community that terrorism is bad, and is bad no matter where or no matter who is the country which is affected.
Finally, you ran for presidency in Colombia in 2010, as I mentioned before. Do you plan on running in the next election?
Let me tell you something. Women, when we decide to go to politics, we are different than men. For me, politics is not my goal. For me, politics is just a tool to serve to my country. But I'm not ready to do whatever it's necessary to do to have the power. I'm not going to buy a vote. I'm not going to offer contracts, never. So if there is a room for me to run again, I'm going to do it. It's difficult. The political scenario is easier sometimes for men because some of them, they just want to have the power. I just want to help my country. I just want to serve my country. So I'm going to see. If there is a room, I'm going to try. If not, there are so many places to serve my country. Right now, I'm a chair of 2 different NGOs. One of them is working with the soldiers, the former and the mobilized members of the guerrilla, and also civilian population who were affected by mines. So this is something very important to do. How we can put these 3 groups working together in order to have education, in order to have productive products, in order to have productive businesses and projects. And there is another NGO which is called Citizen Actionship, and I am also the chair, because we want to promote the young people to be involved in politics, to be involved in civilian work with the society, in solidarity, to create more room for education for poor children in some of the rural Colombian village. So what is important is to be clear about where you can serve in each moment of your life. Right now, this is not my moment for politics, maybe in the future.
Well, I hope for the sake of your country that they see you running again, not just because you are a woman, but because you also seem to have very interesting ideas.
Thank you, Luke.
Dr. Marta Lucia Ramirez, thank you so much for your time. Enjoy the rest of the Herzliya conference here at IDC.
Thank you, Anouk. Thank you so much. And a big hug for all the Israelis who are listening to us right now.
Thank you so much. You're listening to the IDC radio at 106.2, and I'm Anouk Lori. Thank you.